Hey everybody, welcome back to Lucktronics. I decided I wanted to fully repair my Sennheiser HD598s. I found this headband from Audio Sanctuary in the UK. I've been using a Geekery headband pad replacement since mine cracked. I've had these things for 8 years, and they're still my go-to FPS headphones. So I decided to record a video and show you how it's done. First you gotta take out those ear pads. As you can see, the Geekery's don't actually match the original ear pads there, and those are replacements. Audio Sanctuary actually has the $5.99 brown velour pads, and those fit perfectly. They also have the nice big inside of the ear pad. So I take those baffles off. I use a screwdriver, completely unnecessary. I just find it even easier to do so. And the next step is to take off the 3 screws from each side. And I always like to use a magnetic tray so I don't lose any screws in the process. Now we'll speed things up here because you know what it's like to unscrew screws. And if you don't, well, you can slow it down and watch it. Now what we're doing is we're taking off the outer portion of the driver. It's really the housing for the driver, and it's connected via wires, so you want to be careful when you take those apart, just because you don't want to tug at the wires too hard. Now we're going to be replacing most of the wiring with the wiring integrated into the headbands, or the headband that we picked up, but you know, you still don't want to put undue stress on any components there. There is a small PCB on the left-hand side, which you could damage if you aren't careful. So the next step after you get those screws out is to go ahead and actually desolder the original wires. Now I wanted to go ahead and desolder all of the wiring. You could get away technically with just desoldering the headband wiring from the left side, which would keep the left side actually attached to the cup, but I felt more comfortable doing it all the way. So here I am removing the old wires from the little, I don't know if you'd call that a PCB, I guess probably, the little pads there on what appears to be the right hand side. And I took a little masking tape, an R on it, as well as, you can't actually see in pencil there, but the color order that you're going to need, the copper on the left and the red on the right. I just didn't want to forget anything. You can see it there on the left side a little better. So now we have the drivers and the housings fully disconnected from the original cups and headband. Now the headband is actually attached via a couple of screws. There's a little black retainer piece there in addition to the screws. And you just want to unscrew both of those and just kind of push it out and wiggle it free. There you go, here we go, taking off the cup, and you can see that little black retainer. Don't lose that, you'll need that to screw in the new headband to the cups. I fiddled with it for a bit and found out it's much easier than I was anticipating. So I decided to, while I was at it, go ahead and not get myself confused for later and attach the cup to the new headband before detaching the other side from the old one. And that's as simple as reversing the process of what you just did. Go ahead and screw that retaining screw back in. One thing that I didn't really focus in on camera, but it's not perfectly flush at the back between the cup and the headband. And that's actually how it is on stock as well, so not something you need to worry about. At first I was struggling with it, trying to get it perfectly flush, until I realized that the one that was still attached was in fact not perfectly flush. So here we go. Looks like I am desoldering. And the process here is really just melting the solder and pulling out the wire individually. You can probably get away with using all the same solder that was originally on there. I think later on you'll see that I pull off some of the original solder because I didn't feel it was up to snuff, and I replaced it with some new solder. So here we go. Everything is detached from the old and busted headband, which technically I can reuse if I ever want to, so that's going in the closet, somewhere in a drawer. There we go, pushing it against it, you can kind of see, yeah, you can't really tell that well, but it's not perfectly flush, and that's apparently completely normal, and I haven't noticed it in 8 years. So reattaching the left-hand side, the left cup is where the headphone cable goes into, and then it splits off from there, routes through the headband itself, and into the right-hand cup. Now, I use a little bit of masking tape just to hold the wire in place, because I didn't have my other set of third hands unpacked at the time. So a little masking tape just keeps it relatively steady. And then I use my smallish tweezers and do a nice little left-handed solder here. Do the inner pad there, just so I don't end up accidentally detaching the outer pad while, or the outer wire while attaching the inner wire. Alright, so that's a pretty simple process if you ever solder before. We inspect our work using magnifying glass. I tug on it a little bit with my tweezers to make sure we're good to go. And then I accidentally stashed the magnifying glass right in front of the camera for the rest of attaching that left-hand driver to the wires. So we're gonna fast forward here to screwing the left-hand driver back in. Kind of pushed the wire out of the way so it's not, you know, in dead center. It's sort of out to the side. Probably not going to impact things too much, especially because, you know, I only really use these for gaming, but I do use them for competitive first-person shooters because I find that they do incredibly well for positional audio. So we reinstalled the baffle there, and that's just, you know, kind of clicking it into place, pushing it in various different points. And now we attach the right driver. We have our handy reminders, the enamel on the Sennheiser wiring there is red on one side, copper on the other, and then they strip, you know, about a millimeter off of the enamel, so you don't actually have to burn it with a lighter or anything to get the enamel off. You've got plenty to work with to get that connected correctly. Give myself a little bit more solder. Just wet the tip. And I kind of realized that one of the pads, it was pretty gooped up. There's too much solder on it when it came from the factory. So I decided I would go ahead and I can't think of the term right now, but basically apply some more solder to that one pad. So I actually put the inner, just like on the other driver, The inner pad and wire are soldered together now. And somewhere along the line here, I decide I don't like the looks of that. I'm gonna get my handy dandy solder sucker. There's the big old solder sucker, and then just perfectly clean pad to put my own solder in place. There we go, just getting that red wire soldered in place. And as simple as that, all the soldering is done. Really, all the fiddly bits are right there in the soldering. And it's pretty simple stuff. If you've done it a few times, you probably won't screw it up. The wire's a little thin. You don't want to tug on it too hard or anything, but it's really not a big deal. So we just screw in that driver and its housing back into the cup, just like the other side. We have an almost fully functional headphone now. Just click in that baffle, and then we reinstall the ear pads. And you know, if I wasn't confident in my soldering, I would probably take a multimeter and test all this stuff before screwing everything in, but I decided to just go for broke. Everything seemed like it was well secured, and I went ahead and played a match of Call of Duty Warzone with them. They sounded outstanding, alongside the original comfort of the old school headband.